Grace and peace, everybody. Grace and peace. How are you guys doing this Monday evening? All right. I haven't gone live on a Monday in a long time. All right. But we here. But listen, I got my special guest in the back, and we're going to be bringing him on in a minute. This is going to be a great live stream. So listen, you guys get your notepads ready. And I mean, just be ready to take notes. I mean, but this video will be available for playback, so you can watch it anytime. All right. But anyway, let's just get into it. And I'm going to stop my babble. I'm going to start out with the Christian King. Grace and peace, the Christian King. Then we also have Raven Radai, first supporter up in the house. Grace and peace, Raven Radai. Then we also have Jossie. And then we also have brother Stevie Rankins. Listen, as you guys come in, hit that like button and that notification bell, especially if you are a new subscriber to the channel. Stevie says, I'm about to do laundry and watch. Listen, I don't care what y'all doing. Just go ahead, tune in. Just stay tuned in, all right? You could probably just turn the screen off and listen with your earbuds, earpods, or whatever you got, because this is going to be a great live stream. I promise you guys, all right? I promise you. All right, man, listen. We're going to have quite a bit to cover tonight, all right? But first of all, thank you guys for showing up to the live stream. And I'm going to try to make this intro quick because I don't want to hold up my guest time, Grace and peace, OG, grace and peace. All right, so listen. First of all, I want to know how many of you all are familiar with the channel Cleave to Antiquity. All right, type of 1 if you are familiar with the channel Cleave to Antiquity. Type of 2 if you don't. If you are not familiar with the channel Cleave to Antiquity. And I'm gonna tell you like this. I'm gonna prophesy right now, right? All right, I'm gonna prophesy. Just like everybody else that I've had on, especially like who had like less subs than me, I believe that he is gonna surpass me. I really do. I think that his content is great. It is just mwah, it's just that good. But Jossie says that he is familiar with Cleave to Antiquity. Oh yeah, look at that. Brother Adam, grace and peace, says this guy is gold. Oh yeah. I don't know how I came across his channel. I think that, how the YouTube algorithms are, right? So it was just sending me all of these videos and I'm like, who is this guy? And the way that he puts it out, right? Like he'll do like a little maybe 30-second video. And then at the end, he'll say, what do you guys think about this? Kind of get your gears turning. So, but anyway, enough of the babble. Y'all know what time it is. Got to bring in our Jeopardy music time. I'm asking a question live only on YouTube. How should we view Catholics and Orthodox? So far, 0% of you all say brothers and sisters in the faith. 75% of you all say they need the true gospel. 12% of you all say it depends on who you talk to. And the other 12% of you all say that you are just here for the conversation. All right, but listen, we all know as the live stream goes on, those numbers are willing to change. But listen, let's go ahead. Let's get ready to bring on our guest, Mr. Ben from Cleave to Antiquity. Grace and peace, sir. How are you doing? Grace and peace.
Good. Very blessed. Thanks for having me on.
Listen, thank you for taking time out to come on and, have this conversation. Like I said earlier, man, I came across your channel from a lot of the shorts that you posted. And I was like, man, this guy's pretty solid. Now, I know a little bit about Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy. I've done, quite a few videos dealing with church fathers or some stuff on church history, but your stuff is like next level. And I'm like, I got to go back through some of your videos because of some of the quotes that you've brought out and some of the things in church history on Roman Catholic and Orthodox positions. I was like, man, I got to go back. I got to save that video. Then I got to update my slides. So thank you, sir. Thank you for showing up, man. What state do you live in?
So I'm in Florida.
Ah, what part?
I'm in the Tampa area.
Oh, okay. I'm from Fort Lauderdale. Listen, drop a bomb for Florida, all right? I'll drop a bomb for Florida. Yeah, I was born and raised in the Fort Lauderdale area, and actually, I think I might be coming to the Tampa area in maybe like late August or so. So we still kind of got that up in the air, but it looks like we're leaning more towards visiting that area. Later on this year in the summertime.
Yeah, it's a nice part of town, man, for sure.
Yeah, I want to check it out. I actually had a friend. Well, I had a friend who moved there. I want to say maybe about 5, 6 years ago, and my brother-in-law, he's with the military. He just moved there from California, and he was kind of bummed out when he had to move from California, but now he's in Tampa. He's like, he doesn't even want to leave. He's like, this is where I want to be, right here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
so yeah,
it's not as expensive as other parts of Florida too. So
really,
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. You can still
okay,
for 200,000 over here. So
wow.
yeah, yeah,
Oh man, yeah, because I'm in Georgia right now in the Metro Atlanta area, and I mean, 200,000. It's
yeah,
like, yeah, it's like, I mean, you might be living in a shack,
yeah.
for 200,000.
For about
Oh yeah, yeah. So what is so tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, I know that I saw where you are an associate pastor.
yeah,
Okay, okay. So
yeah.
do you mind sharing what church it is, or?
Sure. So I'm an associate pastor in a non-denominational church. Now I'm still going through seminary, but I got the position through my senior pastor, or ordained via my senior pastor, while so I can get some preaching experience while I go through seminary. But the apologetic stuff, that I've been involved in that for longer than I've been in ministry. I've probably been involved in the Roman Catholic Eastern Orthodox debates for maybe about 5 or so years, I would say.
Okay.
But on other platforms outside of YouTube, the entire reason I made the channel was so that I could take those arguments that were working so well on other platforms and bring them here, because I noticed there's a distinct lack on this particular platform of the level of apologetics, especially with history, because a lot of people, it's more philosophical, the type of argumentation.
Right.
But if you appeal to church history, you flip the script on the people that you're discussing with, especially if it's an Eastern Orthodox or Roman Catholic, because that's kind of the whole claim, right?
Right, exactly. Wow, okay. Because, yeah, and I actually got into this maybe about, I want to say a little over a year ago. I started addressing Roman Catholics and Orthodox, and it was because they started challenging me. So, at first I was kind of ignorant as into, knowing what Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholics taught. And then, when people started sending me messages and commenting on my videos saying that, you're not a part of the true church. Your church only started 500 years ago and you got the wrong canon and all of that. I said, let me start looking into some of this stuff. And then as I started to look into these things, I said, wait, a lot of these claims that you guys are making, as I go back and read the church fathers that you guys are telling me to read, I don't think that they're saying the same thing that
Right.
you guys are saying. So, especially when it comes to things like the papacy and all of that stuff. So,
Right.
yeah.
I think a lot of it boils down to like word concept fallacies, right?
Yeah.
So they'll take things that maybe the church fathers wouldn't have had so much of an issue with it, but they'll kind of twist it and take it out of context to make it mean what they're stating it means. There's also a lot of like disagreement within the early church fathers. So
Yep.
there's an argument that I usually make with Eastern Orthodox. They say, well, because we hold the sola scriptura, which is scripture is the sole infallible rule of faith, right? So it's a sole infallible authority. Now we accept secondary authorities like tradition, right? But that's secondary; it's subordinate to scripture's authority. For the Eastern Orthodox, they don't have that distinction. They say both are on the same level, right? So when I press them on what the basis is for them to accept the traditions that they accept as infallible, right? They can't give me a list of these traditions. It's just not there. But they'll say, well, it's apostolic tradition. The problem with making that claim is when you read the church fathers, there's contradictory responses. Like if you've ever read the Didache, which is, are you familiar with the work, the Didache?
Yeah, I have that on my logo software. I haven't read through the whole thing, but I have read through a lot of it.
Sure. So it's dated. I recommend anybody to read it because it's got some helpful information to like date doctrinal development. So when you read the Didache, it has 4 different versions or forms of baptism that they claim are apostolic tradition in this one text. So full immersion in a river, full immersion in standing water, pouring and sprinkling. And they claim it's apostolic tradition. Okay, so all four, but it's in order of preference, right? And then you have other church fathers that say, no, 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 the apostolic tradition is triple immersion, or no, 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 the apostolic tradition is pouring. So it's like, okay, you have contradicting claims of apostolic. So if they claim that's the basis for the traditions they hold to be infallible, how do you weed through all of that? That's why we would state that tradition is fallible. You take it with a grain of salt because there's contradictory claims all throughout history.
Yeah, and then also too, one of the things that I've been noticing about tradition is that sometimes it changes based on the political climate, based on if a certain sect of Christians are being heavily persecuted and they got to move to like different areas. So sometimes those traditions can change on certain things like that. But I saw a video that you done recently about the Pope. That was pretty interesting. Some of the stuff that you brought out about the new Pope, Pope Leo. Yeah, go ahead.
That's an interesting topic. I think there's a lot of, so I'm very new to X, right? I never used X. I'm not a big social media guy, to be completely honest. But one of my friends, Redeem Zoomer, was like, you got to get on here so you can network a little bit.
So Redeem Zoomer.
Yeah. I actually just filmed with him just before I came on here. So.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, he was like, you need to get on X. So I hopped on the platform so I could network a little bit. But there's like a mass delusion with individuals thinking that this new Pope is going to somehow be completely different than Francis.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. His own brothers say that he's going to be Francis 2.0. So like,
oh yeah.
He's completely different. No, he's the Francis pick. There's not. I don't think there's going to be any major difference. The only thing I'll say is this: he is an American, so he likely knows the gripes of the traditionalists that are in America, because that's really who slowed down Francis's plans for the last 5 years, because he wanted synodality, in which basically this is what it looks like. If you were to be a Roman Catholic in Poland and you want to get your marriage annulled, you can't do it. If you go to Germany, though, you're in another jurisdiction, you can get your marriage annulled in Germany. It's a kind of like a synod, it's a synod level of leadership. If you go to a different jurisdiction, you will have slightly different rules. So that's what Francis was pushing. That was really slowed down by the kind of traditionalists that have YouTube channels from America. So he's aware of these challenges in American Catholicism. So he's going to be able to address them with more tact. What I would predict is that he's going to throw some treats to the traditionalists. He might bring back the Latin Mass, stop suppressing that. He'd be wearing more traditional attire, but he's still very much going to be pushing the Francis agenda and all of the other ways that are not so great.
Oh yeah. I've been, especially the thing about the marriages, like in Poland and in Germany and stuff like that. There was an article that was released. What was that? A couple of days ago. And I read through some of it, and they were talking about how to see how he was going to keep that going, to where like certain priests can have their marriage annulled, and then certain ones they probably can't have theirs annulled, so they was trying to see how he was going to work all of that stuff out. So
yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be specifically about like priests getting marriage annulled, because they can't marry unless you're an Eastern Catholic, but it would be for Catholic laymen if they were in Poland and they wanted to, I don't know, appeal to their bishop to annul their marriage or something. They could just move to another jurisdiction and say, okay, well, now I'm in this other jurisdiction.
Gotcha. Okay.
We have different rules or whatever. The big issue, and I'm just using those as examples, it's not something that's currently going on.
Right.
But the German bishops in the Roman Catholic Church, they're currently pushing for female priests. That's the big push right now. So they're trying female priests into the Roman Catholic Church, and they're threatening schism, to break off from the church if the new pope doesn't acquiesce to their push for this. The German bishops, they're the most liberal out of all of them. They want the pro everything that you shouldn't be including in church. They want all that stuff.
Yeah, because I was just about to ask you, like, how likely do you think that he'll end up moving that stuff forward? Because I think that before or around the time that Francis was elected, that was one of the major concerns of, how far is he going to take, like homosexuality in the church, female priests and stuff like that. Like how far is he going to go? And I've been hearing a lot of people saying that whoever Francis' successor is, that's going to be the person to kind of toe the line on those particular topics.
Yeah, I don't think he's ever going to like bless same-sex marriage. I don't think that's going to happen. The German bishops would probably like that. I don't think that would happen. Female deacons, maybe. Female priests, I don't think that's going to happen within this pontificate. Female deacons, maybe. I would doubt it, but I think the play really for him is to continue on with the synodal model that Francis was pushing forward, because he parroted it in one of his first speeches that he made. Yeah. His first speech, he said, well, I'm going to continue on with Francis's synodal vision. So if he implements synodality, then it's a lot less difficult for them to implement this other stuff, because then, we've already got jurisdictions that allow marriage annulments in these certain cases. We've already got jurisdictions that do ABC 1, 2, 3. So now it's more accepted in like a less tacit way, just kind of like it's like a soft acceptance, jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And once you have support in that way, it's less jarring to then do something like include female deacons or maybe the things like they pushed with fiducia supplicans and then later backtracked. I don't know if you heard about that, but it was a Vatican document that basically says,
those blessing same-sex couples, but not like marriages. But I read through it, and the language is kind of vague, but it was enough to kind of stir up the Roman Catholic Church, especially with the conservatives. So
yeah, and then Pope Francis came afterwards, and he was like, "Oh no, actually, I wasn't talking about the couples. I was talking about individuals." But the document,
yeah, exactly, yeah.
It's like being kind of double mouthed about it, mealy mouthed.
Because a lot of people say that, and I haven't really been following too much of Pope Francis until I'll probably say the last 3 months or so. But I've heard things here and there, and it was like he was kind of sometimes he will make the liberals mad, sometimes he'll make the conservatives mad. So it was always like the pendulum was swinging back and forth, but do you believe that the concept of the papacy is a biblical concept? Like how do we get to this point where we have a pope, over one entire church? Now, because Roman Catholics, they'll tell us that, they have apostolic succession from the time of Peter. Peter was the first pope, and then he just kept laying hands, and everybody kept laying hands on each other. And this is how we end up with, Francis, and now we got Pope Leo today. Like how accurate is that?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, but something that's important to address. If you've ever read the writings of Jerome, he actually says that the modern understanding of bishop is not what's present in the early church. It's more of a development. And he says it's not a divine institution. That's more of just a tradition thing. It's something that evolved over time. In the early church, bishop, was more of like a senior pastor position. And we can see this all throughout the early church because there are multiple bishops in the same region. You don't see that today, right? And that's not the modern concept or understanding. It was more of a senior pastor position. Now, as that developed over time, sure, you do start to have the bishops over certain areas, and then you have pastors or priests underneath them, and then so on and so forth. So that's the first thing to chip away at is, okay, the bishop understanding that we have today, that's not a divine institution. Okay. If that's not a divine institution, that undermines the concept that apostolic succession is a divine institution itself as well. If their understanding is completely different, then the ordination is simply laying on of hands for the presbyters. So meaning from pastor to pastor to pastor, not from bishop and downwards. So now the question of papal supremacy within the first 1,000 years of the church, there was no papal supremacy within the first 1,000 years of the church. The Vatican has actually acknowledged this. If you've ever read the Chetty document, it says that the Bishop of Rome, which is the Pope is Bishop of Rome, did not exercise canonical authority over the churches in the East. Go and look that up. The Chetty document. That's a Vatican document. They've admitted it. So for the first 1,000 years, if you don't have canonical authority over the East, where do you have authority over? That's the West. That's Rome. Okay. So papal supremacy did not exist within the first 1,000 years. They admit this in their own documents. Now, as far as when did it really start to emerge? I mean, you start to see church fathers that are Western church fathers that write very highly of the Bishop of Rome. They start to call like the Roman Church the Ark and things like that. But they're fighting against the West a bit ideologically. You read the Eastern fathers during these same times, they don't say those things. And I actually have some citations from Eastern fathers that write pretty explicitly against the fact that some of the Western Christians were saying that, the Pope has authority over everyone. No, that's not the case. He's trying to establish himself as having that, but that's not necessarily what was handed down from the apostles. Let me see if I can pull up some citations here. But
if you need to, I can share your screen.
Yeah, no worries. I'm doing this on mobile, so it's a little difficult to do that.
Okay, no problem.
But so Chetty document, I'll just go ahead and I'll read that citation from Chetty. So it says, over the centuries, a number of appeals was made to the Bishop of Rome, also from the East. In disciplinary matters, such as the deposition of a bishop, an attempt was made at the Synod of Sardica to establish rules for such a procedure. Sardica was received at the Council of Trullo. Okay, I'm going to continue on to this. Appeals regarding disciplinary matters were made to the See of Constantinople as well. So not only Rome, Constantinople also received appeals, and to other sees. Such appeals to major sees always were treated in a synodal way. Appeals to the Bishop of Rome from the East expressed the communion of the church, but the Bishop of Rome did not exercise canonical authority over the churches in the East. So if he did not have authority over the churches in the East, guess what? Papal supremacy is something that came in the second millennium, meaning the second 1,000 years of the church.
Yeah.
So are you aware? Let me fix this. This is driving me nuts.
No,
are you? I'll mess with it later. When the church split, the East and the West.
Yeah, 1054, the Great Schism.
Mm-hmm. So what you have is you have a number of patriarchates in the East, and then you have the one patriarchate in the West, which is Rome.
Right.
In 54 schism, you have literally everybody going to the East, and then the West. Guess what? There's only one patriarchate left. So now he's like, well, I'm top dog. Well, yeah, it's easy to be top dog when you're the only church left. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So that's what you see in the next 1,000 years, which logically follows if everybody else is kicked out of the church, you're the last guy left, and the church is ran by these kind of like senior pastor positions, which at this point have evolved into actual bishops. Then if you're the only one left, yeah, it makes sense you'd be top dog because you're the only one left.
Right. Okay, so wait, so are you saying that at one point the Roman Catholic Church, they broke off and started their own church like they claimed that the Reformers did?
Well, it's not as though they started their own church. It's more that they broke communion with the churches in the East. So at the Fourth Schism, this happened in the interim of the death of a pope, which pope is just means like papa, father, right?
Right.
Oh, bishop, pope, right? It's not as if like only the Roman Catholic Bishop of Rome was the pope, if that makes sense. But it was the death of the Roman bishop, and then one of his I believe one of his legates basically squandered a military deal with the East that then ignited a chain reaction of things. There was also the disagreement about the filioque, and they end up splitting the union. So then all of the churches in the East maintain their own communion there, and then just the one patriarchate in the West maintains their own communion. So it's not as if he ran off and created his own church. They just broke communion between the East and the West.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, it's yeah, and I have a document, and you're probably already familiar with it, the Patriarchal Encyclical of 1895.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the one where I think that Pope Leo and those within the Eastern Orthodox Church were talking about coming back together and trying to reunify, but it didn't really go so well. When the East when they responded to Pope Leo the 13th. Let me see if I can bring it up.
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
Let's do this. All right. But this is the reply to Pope Leo the 13th. It says, "But as had been said before, the Western Church from the 10th century downwards has privily brought into herself through the papacy various and strange and heretical doctrines and innovations. And so she has been torn away and removed far from the true and Orthodox Church of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
How necessary then is it for you to come back and return to the ancient and unadulterated doctrines of the church in order to attain the salvation in Christ after which you press? You can easily understand if you intelligently consider the command of the heaven ascended apostle to the Thessalonians." Apostle Paul to the Thessalonians. So, and I have that whole entire document, downloaded on my computer. But I thought that was pretty interesting because I do hear, and I do see a lot of those who are Orthodox and Roman Catholic. It's like they're saying that, yeah, we're going to reunify, and some have even told me that they're going to reunify to kind of, wipe out Protestantism and all of that stuff. I mean, it's only a small sect that actually says those particular things, but, and I'm just like, I don't know if you guys really know the history between the East and the West and why there was a great schism in the first place and how they tried to reunify even, as recently as 1895, and it really didn't go well. Like, do you believe that maybe one day that there is a chance that the East and the West could reunify and become that one big church again?
I think there's definitely some measures being taken in that direction. I don't know if you're familiar with the 2025 Nicaea Council that they're going to. It's like the big celebration commemorating Nicaea I. But
okay,
they're coming together to some of the statements by the EP as well as by the former previous Pope Francis, have stated that they're talking about maybe coming up with a common date for Easter, which would solve a lot of the issues there. But the other issue is that they already have binding anathemas between the two groups. The Eastern Orthodox at the Synod of Blackernay, they anathematize anybody, which anathema means nothing less than complete separation from God.
Yeah, you covered that recently.
Yeah, don't listen to anybody that tries to tell you it's just like, it's basically just an excommunication or something. That's not true. It's separation from God unless you repent, right? So
yeah, oh yeah.
It's not as if those things could just be repealed lightly. But they have anathematized people who believe in the Filioque. At Nicaea too, they anathematize people who refuse to worship using icons. At a later council in the ROCOR, they actually have anathemas against ecumenism, which is basically these meetings like they're doing in Nicaea. So it's a little contradictory, but I think there's a lot of that web that would need to get untangled. I don't think that that's going to happen anytime soon. They'd have to wind back quite a few anathemas. I think it'll be easier from Rome's end because they've already made so many concessions. And that's what the Chetty document really was. It was an attempt to bring back unity within the Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Catholics. And that's the same thing that you see with this push in synodality. They're trying to make their church governance structure closer to the Eastern Orthodox while still maintaining a pope. So they're like, well, we're going to kind of do it like the Eastern Orthodox do it, but we're still going to maintain the papacy. So will it happen in our lifetimes? Maybe not. I think we're going to see more and more concessions made, though, because every single patriarch within the Eastern Orthodox Church right now is an ecumenist. Which is odd because that's an anathema position if you are within ROCOR. So then if you're in ROCOR, then all your patriarchs are heretics bound for hell. But
wow,
according to their own documents. But yeah, we might see it maybe in a lifetime or two, but there'd be a lot of things to unwind before then.
Wow. So how do you spell the Chetty document?
Cheiti, I believe. I don't have it up in front of me anymore. I was looking at other notes.
Hold on. I think it's Chieti. Yep, I got it right here. All right, I'm just trying to pull it up so I can go ahead and I'm gonna go
Yeah,
ahead and
that's
save that. Huh?
really what that document is. It's a ecumenical dialogue document between the East and the West, and
Yeah.
they're concessions saying that, oh well, for the first 1,000 years, the Pope didn't exercise canonical authority over the churches in the East, but that debunks the papacy. There are a lot of Roman Catholics that will try to discredit that document because they really don't like it.
Hmm.
It's not like it's an infallible document, but it is something that the Vatican signed off on, so it is binding in that sense.
Wow.
They'll
Yeah.
they'll try to worm away any way they can. The Procor anathemas against ecumenism, that was in 1983, and
Okay.
I'll read to you this. This is so if you're in Procor, right? This would be applicable. So to those who attack the Church of Christ by teaching that Christ's church is divided into so-called branches which differ in doctrine and way of life, or that the church does not exist visibly, but will be formed in the future when all branches or sects, denominations, and even religions united into one body, and do not distinguish the priesthood and mysteries of the church from those of the heretics. So if they were to say that their communion is valid, right, they'd be considered heretical. Or to say that the baptism and Eucharist of heretics is effectual for salvation. So if they were to say Roman Catholic Eucharist works, that would be
Right.
a level position. Therefore, to those who knowingly have communion with these aforesaid heretics, or who advocate, disseminate, or defend their new heresy of ecumenism under the pretext of brotherly love or the supposed unification of separated Christians, anathema. So if they're anathema, but all the patriarchs are doing that now. So
Wow.
they just forget their own documents. I don't know, man. It's wild.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Because I was just about to ask you, like, how are they going to be able to work that out? Especially when I'm reading. Let me see. That I think that it is in the Confession of Dositheus. I'm trying to see if I can pull it up, where the Confession of Dositheus is 1672, where they're basically like, the only way that the Eucharist could be valid is if it's performed by an Orthodox bishop or priest. All other Eucharists or sacraments, that's just invalid, and we don't accept those. So, anathema to anybody, and I think they did say anathema to anybody who administered those sacraments or those sacraments to someone who was outside of the Orthodox Church. So I'm like, just like you said, that there was a big web that they're just gonna have to, like, a lot of stuff that they're gonna have to cut out in order to achieve full ecumenism,
Yeah.
because some of this stuff goes back, just like you mentioned in one of your videos, some of this stuff is deep rooted in their history, and this goes back centuries.
Yeah, I think the issue where they really fall under that anathema isn't necessarily so much as they accept the communion of Roman Catholics, because they currently don't. It's that they are tied to this new movement of ecumenism, all of them, and that is something that's particularly considered anathema under that under the ROCOR 1980s anathemas, is if they are participating in ecumenism under the false pretext of brotherly love, right? Which is what they're doing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
not only with their, I did a video, I don't know if I ever ended up publishing it, I think I did, but it had literally just a back-to-back picture of every single current patriarch of the Eastern Orthodox Church with Pope Francis hanging out, having these ecumenical dialogues. And it's like, okay, if there are these anathemas against ecumenism and you are currently in the middle of these types of dialogues and you're being super friendly, and every single one of them wrote a letter of congratulations to the new Bishop of Rome, and like, oh, you're my brother, we love you, God bless you, like all of that stuff, that 100 years ago is foreign to the ideas that the Eastern Orthodox have held historically. But I think that's probably one of the biggest issues with the Eastern Orthodox view. And I don't want to misrepresent them, because some of them will say, and this is a modernization of even really what the canons mean. Some of them will say that the ROCOR anathemas no longer apply because they have just came back into communion with the MP, which is the Moscow Patriarchate. But the problem with that is there is no subsequent council that undoes these anathemas. They just say, oh, well, they no longer apply because they came back into communion with the Moscow Patriarchate. It doesn't make any sense. That's subjective.
Right. Yeah, I was just about to ask, like how do they do that when, you know, what would the council even look like, you know, for starters? So yeah.
Yeah, it's the way that the canons were meant to be held. The canons of any ecumenical council, which they only hold the first 7. Some will claim that there's an 8th in the Eastern Orthodox view. The way that the canons of these ecumenical councils are meant to be held, they're meant to be held in perpetuity, so forever in the future, right? Now, let me put an asterisk by that. They have a concept called economia, which is that they can choose, the bishops can choose how to apply them in individual instances. Let's say, I don't know, somebody that's at one of the churches within your region needs church discipline. They've sinned against the canons, so you need to apply a certain penance to them or something. They can lower or increase or whatever, or change the punishment that might not necessarily be laid out in the canon. The rigidity of that would be acrovia. If you're being lenient, that would be economia. So they do have economia, and they can choose not to apply it in a specific instance, but they can't reject them. What you see with the modern Eastern Orthodox Church is they've moved completely away from that view. They just think you can reject them willy-nilly, but that's not the case. And I don't know if you saw my debate with Jay Dyer. He admitted that's what he thought happened. He's like, well, the bishop can just accept or reject the canons of ecumenical councils in perpetuity. Well, you know what that does? It makes them subjective. They're no longer infallible. They're just
right.
You can pick and choose.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I don't want to hog all of the questions. I do see that some people are asking questions in the chat. This is Josh C. He says, is it just the Eastern Orthodox churches moving in that direction of ecumenicalism, and not like, for instance, the Greek or Oriental?
Okay, that's a good question. So Greek Orthodox Church is a part of the Eastern Orthodox churches. So like Go Arch in the West, they're extremely ecumenist. They actually are more ecumenist than the Russian Orthodox Church. I don't know if you've ever heard like Archbishop Elpidophoros. He is the guy that is the leader of Go Arch, which is the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America, right? So okay. You've got Archbishop Elpidophoros, who literally has gone to Hindu temples and blessed them and called them a sacred space. So he's taking it a step further. He's doing ecumenism with other religions.
Oh, wow. Oh, man. Oh.
Exactly. So actually, I have some citations I can read to you from him. So a couple things about this guy. He is a known supporter of Freemasons. He wrote the introduction to a...
Oh, man. Wait, hold on. Can you repeat that?
He's a known supporter of Freemasons. So there's a Freemason named Nicholas Laus who published a Duopolitic. He wrote the introduction to this book and called it like, oh, it's an amazing work. The book is literally by a master Mason, and it's writing about political subversion. The guy's like, this is a great book. You know, wonderful. But
man.
Then again, Freemasonry is condemned in Eastern Orthodoxy, but they don't excommunicate the guy. It doesn't make any sense. But let me read to you a citation from him. So he says, when you elevate one religion above all others, it's as if you decide there's only one path leading up to the top of the mountain. But the truth is you simply cannot see the myriads of paths that lead up to the same destination because you're surrounded by the boulders of prejudice that obscure your view. So all religions lead to God kind of thing. You see the same language with Pope Francis.
I was just about to ask. I'm like, you know, because I covered that a couple of times here, and I had some conversations with some of those who were Roman Catholic, and I'm like, well, how do you guys square the circle? And the thing is that when he said it, what was that, back in October or something like that? I was like, that's not the first time that he said it. He's been saying it for quite a while. I think that the first time I heard about him saying it, and it it was a video that I played. It was like a commercial. I think they said it was played during the Super Bowl back in like 2013, 2014, or something like that. And he basically was saying the same thing then. All paths, all religions lead to God. And I didn't know that, that is actually prevalent in Orthodoxy, because I've heard a lot of Orthodox, when I started bringing out what Pope Francis said in regards to that, they were just like, well, see, in our church we don't have any of that. No Orthodox will ever say something like that. And it's interesting that you bring that up, and wow, that is pretty interesting. That's pretty, because we have a guy here in the chat, and he's asking, can you line this up with prophecy and the one world religion in the end times? I mean, like, I don't know where you are, with your eschatology. We actually had a conversation about that Saturday, but some people believe that this is setting it up for the Antichrist and the one world religion. So
Yeah.
so where would you stand on that?
So I think with the ecumenism talk, this kind of like syncretistic push, there's a reason that you see the leaders of these various traditions saying this same and similar things. And I mentioned that he has Freemasonic ties for a reason. I just did a course. I taught a class. I do a Sunday apologetics class at my church. I don't put it on YouTube, but
Okay.
we're talking about Freemasonry. So I do apologetics. I do different topics every single week. But the reason it ties in, have you ever read the Alta Vendita?
No, I haven't.
So this is not a conspiratorial text. This was actually a text that was cited within the papal decree that decried Freemasonry. It was a text that was intercepted by some of the cardinals of the Roman Catholic Church in, I'm going to butcher the date. Anyway, it was intercepted by some of the cardinals, and it was basically like the Freemason playbook to subvert the Roman Catholic Church. But
Oh, you know what? I've heard of that.
yeah.
I've heard it. I've never read it, but I've heard of that.
Let me,
What?
I'm going to read
What is the name of that again?
called the Alta Vendita. So I'm just going to read to you a little snippet from the Alta Vendita. Let me pull it up real quick.
Okay.
But this, the Freemasonry playbook, once they have subverted or like gotten some kind of a tie to the church, this is what they want to do. So let me just bring this up real quick. Default. 1 second. Sorry, man.
Yeah, no problem. Take your time.
So,
wow.
But yes, this is actually included. This is one of the works that was cited in a papal condemnation. So this isn't like some fringe text. This was something that was intercepted. That it's the permanent instruction of the Alta Vendita. So it's a Masonic blueprint for the subversion of the Catholic Church. This is
1859, right?
So this is included in, I think it was Pope Pius that encouraged every layman within the Roman Catholic Church to read this.
Yes,
so
Pope Pius IX. I'm looking at it now. Wow.
All right, so I'm going to read. Okay. So I'm going to read you a brief snippet. So this is their playbook. In time, this mindset would be so pervasive that priests would be ordained, bishops would be consecrated, cardinals would be nominated, whose thinking was in step with the modern thought rooted in the French Revolution's Declaration of the Rights of Man, which is a Freemasonic text.
Oh,
and
man.
Of the 1789. Religious pluralism, sound familiar? Equality of religion, separation of church and state. Eventually, a pope would be elected from these ranks who would lead the church on the path of the Enlightenment and renewal. It must be stressed that it was not their aim to place a Freemason on the chair of Peter, so they don't want a Freemason proper to be the pope. They just want somebody who's amenable to these ideas. Their goal is to affect an environment that would eventually produce a pope and hierarchy won over to the ideas of liberal Catholicism, all while believing themselves to be faithful Catholics. So the three things: religious pluralism, equality of religions, separation of church and state. And then you have guys like Archbishop Elpidophoros, who I just told you, he wrote the introduction to the book called Nuopolitik, which is written by a master Mason, Nicholas Laus. And then he's saying religions are a pathway to God. It doesn't matter. You can just be a Hindu, you can be a Buddhist, you can be whatever, right? That's straight out of the playbook here. I mean, this is what I say. If it walks like a duck, sounds like a duck, it's a duck, right? So,
man.
you see these types of statements parroted not only by Archbishop Elpidophoros, you saw them with Pope Francis. I guarantee
Yep.
you're probably going to see them with the subsequent successor to Francis, since he said he's going to walk in line with his teaching. He might back off on that a little bit. But you also have citations from the ecumenical patriarchate. So ecumenical patriarch Bartholomew has made very similar citations. Statements. Let me read to you something from him. I'm going to pull it up real quick. He said,
Wow.
he said, we're all created by God, and as such, we're all brothers and sisters. We have the same heavenly Father, whatever we call him. And then he gets challenged. Charlie Rose is interviewing him. He says, all religions have the same heavenly Father. Bartholomew, who's the ecumenical patriarch, of course, was the patriarch's reply, adding, God is but one, independently of the name we give him, Allah or Yahweh, and so on. God is one, and we are his children. So it doesn't matter if you're Muslim, right? It doesn't matter. We're all worshiping the same guy. You know, this is straight out of the Alta Venditas playbook. You got to know the signs.
Man, okay, so this, oh man, this almost seems like that that ecumenism is possible. You know, like this this could end up being possible, you know, because just until now I was under the impression that well, you know, I don't know if that we'll see this in our lifetime, but I don't know, man. I mean, that the way that things are going, and wow, and these are recent quotes that you're bringing up. So I would be surprised within the next 20 to 30 years, you know, I could be going back and being like, I remember when me and Brother Ben was having this conversation, and here we are now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's definitely moving in that direction. And the reason that there's kind of this praxis shift on how they view the canons of the ecumenical councils is so that they can be amenable to just rejecting them willy-nilly. So the canons of councils, or even local synods in which they have anathemas against these other groups, if it's just subjective and it's based off of the bishops, you get every single bishop to agree, hey, and we're throwing this one in the trash. With that praxis shift, it doesn't matter, since they're all subjective anyway. They're trying to make them so that they're not as binding as they were intended to be. I think specifically so that they can at least with those that are still in communion with the ecumenical patriarch, can eventually tie themselves back into Rome in some way. The first step, though, like I said, is going to be the common date for Easter. Once you have that, the rest of it kind of flows downhill from there.
Yeah, because it seems like that whole date for Easter thing, and I mean, I've kind of heard people mention it here and there, but for some reason it seemed like that this year it was a pretty big deal, that a lot of people was talking about the correct date for Easter. You know, some were saying that, you know, it was at the end of April. Some were saying that it was like on the 14th, and, you know, but I did hear a lot of those talks about like the correct date of Easter. Wow, that's pretty heavy. That's pretty heavy. But, you know, and this is what I've always said to Roman Catholics and Orthodox, and I'm just like, you know, you guys, you know, I'm not trying to take a dig at, you know, what you guys are a part of, but, you know, we just got to be honest, and I think we have to address some of these things, because there are some major concerns. Because if you guys want to, you know, insult us for holding to sola scriptura by allowing the Bible to be the sole infallible authority of the practice and the life of the believer in Christ, and you say that, no, we have to have tradition and history and apostolic succession and all of these things, it seems like that, just what you just alluded to like 2 minutes ago, hey, if the authority comes together and say that, hey, we don't want to hold to this anymore, now we want to move in this direction, you know, like, what's stopping them from doing that, you know?
Yeah, it is not to throw too big of philosophical terms, but it is an issue with they claim to have epistemic certainty, right? That's kind of the big in Orthodox. They say, well, we have epistemic certainty. Protestantism is just subjective. It doesn't matter, because sola scriptura, right? If you're going to straw man sola scriptura and say, well, it's sola scriptura just means Bible alone for anything. That's not true. Like, we accept tradition. Praying with your eyes closed is tradition. Going to church, listening to sermon, that's tradition. Show me in the Bible where it says every Sunday go listen to a sermon. It says worship. It says participate in communion. It says do not neglect the gathering. It doesn't say listen. sermon. So those are all traditions. So we do accept tradition. We just don't view them as infallible, right?
Right.
That's the issue with my channel is mostly focused on addressing like pop apologetics, because there's a lot of really bad arguments out there.
It
So
is.
I want to address those first. One of the worst ones is the like canon conundrum. So they say, how do you hold the scripture as infallible without an infallibly defined list? Okay. So, but the thing is, if you hold to that same standard, how could you hold tradition as infallible without an infallible list of infallible traditions? Nobody can answer that for me.
I need to use that one. I need to use that one.
Yeah, that's an easy one-liner. So
Yeah.
infallible. Where's your infallible list of infallible traditions? That's super easy. But the thing is, some of them will say, "Oh, well, the ecumenical councils." I'm like, "Yeah, but that's not the complete deposit of every infallible tradition that you hold to. Like, there's more.
Exactly.
It would need to be complete, which they just don't have. But the issue, like I was saying, with the canons of the ecumenical councils, there's many they no longer hold to. It's just they're not held to. Like even at Nicaea 1, which is one of the most cited ecumenical councils in these types of debates, Canon 11 says you'll spend certain. I'm not even gonna look at my notes. I talk about this so much. Canon 11 says if you apostatize, if you become an apostate, right?
Yeah.
Spend so many years as a hearer, so many years as a prostrator, right? And what both of those are, they're categories of worshiper. Okay. Hearers and prostrators no longer exist within the Eastern Orthodox Church. So this isn't even a matter of discipline. This is just removing an entire category of worshiper from an ecumenical council and just saying, well, it's okay that this no longer exists. Not a big deal. If that's the case, if you're basing your infallible tradition off of the ecumenical councils, but you don't even follow their canons, what are you even talking about? Are you just saying, I kind of like the idea of the ecumenical council, like Arianism is bad, or that kind of stuff. Like, just the subjective idea of the council. But if you're not holding to the canons, what are you holding to? It's just subjective.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when people start bringing up different councils, and I'll read certain things from the councils. Like, for instance, like the Second Council of Nicaea, where I'll ask the question. I'm like, okay, well, people who don't bow down and kiss the icons, are they an anathema? Are they separated from God? And some people are like, no, I don't believe that. And I'm like, but if you're gonna hold to the 7 ecumenical councils, and you believe that Nicaea too is an ecumenical council, well, then you would have to believe that a person such as myself, who does not bow down and kiss the icons, that I am an anathema. And, sadly, there are a lot of people who are Roman Catholics and Orthodox who are not familiar with that. So it's like, I'm just, and this is where, I try to challenge Roman Catholics and those in the Orthodox Church to like really take a deeper dive into what the churches have taught historically, start going in it with an open mind, instead of just saying that, well, I used to be Protestant, and and I hated my pastor, I hated my church, I hated the way that I was brought up in Protestantism. Now I'm Roman Catholic or Orthodox, and now Protestantism bad. Let's just get rid of it because it started 500 years ago. Luther, Calvin, Zwingli, TED Talks, this, that, and the third, all of the arguments. But yeah, it's and this is one of the things that I try to do on my channel, is to try to be fair on both sides. And I'm like, yeah, Protestantism has its issues, which I've addressed. Probably going to continue to address some of the things that happened throughout the history of Protestantism. But we gotta be honest that there's a lot of issues and problems within Orthodox and Roman Catholic history as well. So
yeah, I think the main focus for me really is just exposing the flaws within several of these lines of reasoning. So you brought up a good point with the anathema thing. For what people really need to know before considering becoming Eastern Orthodox or Roman Catholic is that there are several anathemas against, basically, at least in Eastern Orthodoxy, it's against every other group within Christianity, right? It's a little different. They have something called doctrinal development, so they don't necessarily need to look at what the original definition meant. They can kind of just make it up on the fly, which that in itself kind of refutes the unbroken chain of 2,000 years of tradition claim that they have. But within the Eastern Orthodox, they'll say they don't have doctrinal development. So if you look at really what is meant by these anathemas, you look at the minutes of Nicaea II, it will tell you. It says anathema means nothing less than complete separation from God. That's what it means. It doesn't mean anything other than that. It's not an excommunication. It's not some kind of medicinal thing. That's not the case. But you have priests and you have these Eastern Orthodox apologists who will talk to a young evangelical and tell them, "Oh no, we just we know where the Holy Spirit is. We just don't know where He isn't." Right? They'll just give some vague, but in reality, no, we have anathemas against your Baptist grandma. She's going to hell in our view. People know that that is the position that is actually held to within the Eastern Orthodox Church before they join it, rather than joining it and then they kind of massage you into accepting the idea over time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things that I have been running into as well, especially with Roman Catholics and Orthodox. And I'm just like, even when you look at the, let me see, I had it pulled up earlier. Well, for instance, like the Council of Florence, where the Council of Florence clearly states that in order for you to be saved, you have to be subject to the Roman Catholic Church. And then you also have the Unum Sanctum, of the papal bull of Pope Boniface VIII, where he basically says 100 years earlier that it's absolutely necessary for salvation that every human creature be subject to the Roman Pontiff. And I'm always asking, I'm like, okay, well, when did that change? Like did it change or could it change? And I'm just like, these are just concerns that I have as a Protestant, because when a person says that we must be subject to the Roman Catholic Church or the Orthodox Church, I'm like, like, why do you believe that I have to be subject to your particular church for salvation, or just because you're just making a claim that it's the one true church? And a lot of them will just say, well, no, because, they got apostolic succession and all of that. But I'm like, yeah, but we got documents throughout history to where they clearly say that if you are not up under their church or up under their authority, then, you're an anathema, you're outside, and, you're in jeopardy of not being saved. So,
yeah, to be fair to the Eastern Orthodox to the Roman Catholics, they do have a distinction. When you're talking about no salvation outside of the church, they would make exceptions for those who are invincibly ignorant.
Right.
Baptism of desire, maybe they're not a part of the church, but they have a desire to, and they die in that state. Baptism of blood. Those are the three. So like a martyr, somebody who comes to the faith and dies, like the thief on the cross. They would make exceptions for like those three categories. But anybody who is willfully not joining the Roman Catholic Church, even after hearing these claims, they would state that those people are going to hell. So they do make a bit of a distinction. And I think Vatican II really softens up some of the language that they use for Protestants. Now it's like separated brethren. I have some issues with Vatican II as well, where they say that that the plan of salvation involves in the first place, obviously outside of Christians, the Muslims who, along with us, adore the one God. So they say Muslims have the same God as Roman Catholics.
Oh yeah. That's another topic as well.
Yeah, that's an issue. But you see a real softening of the language that Vatican I pushed out in Vatican II. So. But to be completely fair to them, in the Roman Catholic worldview, they do have doctrinal development. So if a subsequent ecumenical council publishes something that maybe is softer than what the previous one was, it's not too much of an issue for them in their worldview. It would really be an issue for the Eastern Orthodox, because they don't have the distinction between canons. Like, I might get too deep into this, but there's a Roman Catholic principle called jus divinum and jus humanum. Jus divinum is law. Jus humanum is human law. So they separate the canons within ecumenical councils between these two categories. So divine law would be what they would consider like dogma, anything that's dogmatic, that promulgates new dogma within the ecumenical council. That would be like infallible and binding, and the rest of it, that's like civil, right? It's not infallible in their perspective. So they do make a little more of a distinction than the Eastern Orthodox do. But jus humanum and jus divinum, that does not exist within the Eastern Orthodox worldview. So that's the main difference. You're talking about at the end of the day, you're talking about the epistemic basis for their authority claims. Like, where do they get for their infallible tradition? For the Eastern Orthodox, it's the ecumenical councils through and through. For the Roman Catholics, it's the Pope. There's no way around it. It's just it's the Pope. It's not the ecumenical councils.
So, what would you say is there much difference between Roman Catholics, Orthodox versus Protestants? Besides like the councils and well, I'm sorry, I would say maybe like the popes and the way that they venerate icons and stuff like that. I mean, are these things that we're talking about now, are these just secondary things that we just kind of like look past and just say, well, you know, they're still brothers and sisters in the faith, that, you know, there's not too much of a difference between us and them? Or is there like a huge dividing line that is between us and them that we're just like, you know, they may not have the true gospel. They may not understand the gospel, and maybe they need to have the gospel preached to them? Or is it just like, well, they understand the gospel, they have Jesus, and maybe we could just kind of, you know, brush some of the stuff to the side?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately my prayer is that God will have mercy on them in their ignorance, in the same way that I would hope that He has mercy on me in the ways that I am ignorant.
Yeah.
I think there are some pretty significant issues. Would I call them not Christians? No. I mean, I think that I would still call them brothers. They can be saved, but I think it's in spite of their theology, not because of their theology.
Right.
So I think that some of the practices can be dangerous, such as especially within the Eastern Orthodox Church, some of the extreme veneration of Mary. Some of the language that is used is very problematic. I remember when I was I went to a divine liturgy with a friend of mine that's Greek Orthodox, and I remember hearing, because you know you can pick up some of the words, it's all in Greek, but you can pick up some of the words like Theotokos, mediatrix. So I talked to him, and I was like, it kind of sent me down a rabbit hole of research. I'm like, do you guys think that she's the mediatrix, meaning like she is like the intermediary that applies grace to people? So we were looking into that, and it was like, no, it's a little bit different than the Roman Catholic view. But the reason I bring this up is because some of the language that is used within the Eastern Orthodox Church surrounding Theotokos is concerning. And the reason that they feel it's acceptable to use the language is because, well, she gave birth to Jesus. So without Mary, the Theotokos, we wouldn't have Christ. So it's okay to use all of the honorifics that we give to Christ to Mary. I don't think that's the case. I wouldn't call Thomas Edison's mother the inventor of the light bulb, right? That's not to use those terms. But let me read to you something. So this is an Eastern Orthodox prayer book from the Holy Transfiguration Monastery in Boston. So
now are these prayers to Mary?
Say what?
Would these be prayers that are to Mary, or just prayers in general?
So
because I know that the Roman Catholics have one too.
Yeah. So this particular prayer book, this is what's read during their liturgy.
Oh, okay.
This once a year, I'm going to read to you the Great Canon to Theotokos. This is a Marian prayer, but just listen to some of the language here. So they say, "Do thou open the portal of compassion unto us, O most blessed Theotokos." That's Mary. "For hoping in thee, let us not fail. We pray through thee, may we be delivered from adversities. For thou art the salvation of the Christian race." What do you think about that?
Wow.
What do you think about? Here, I'll hold that up to the camera so y'all can see some of that right there at the bottom. Salvation of the Christian race. I don't think that is acceptable to use towards Mary or any other saint, regardless if she is Jesus Christ's mother. Now, I have the utmost respect for Mary. She's blessed amongst women, right? She is the mother of our Lord. I would call her the Theotokos. I don't have any issue with that language because Jesus Christ is God. But I would not call her the salvation of the Christian race. I think that's a bit of an issue. Would you agree?
Yeah, correct. There's I'm trying to see if I could pull it up, but I'll have to go to my computer. But like even with the Glories of Mary, they have some of the same, some of the same language. The Roman Catholic prayer book to Mary, to where one that was really problematic out of many that I've read, but there is an excerpt in there where it says that, when Mary speaks, all obey, even God. It even calls Mary omnipotent, like she's all powerful. And, she's all powerful because she gave birth to a son who was omnipotent. So, there's a lot of language in there. And just like you said, there's a couple of passages that allude to the fact that Mary is needed for salvation. Like, her prayers and her intercession is almost necessary. And if you don't have that, then, there's really no hope for your salvation.
Now, I would be careful with citing from some of the Roman Catholic prayer books because they're not binding. Like it's not something that they're necessarily bound to.
Right,
This
correct.
a little bit different because they'll worm away from that type of language.
Yeah, they'll say it's not dogma.
Right. Eastern Orthodox can't worm away from this. This is in their liturgy. The liturgy doesn't change for them. So this is once a year read every single year. So they have no choice
Wow.
to end the use of this language. This really does pin them down. That, and if you've never read something to put in your notes, the Akathist hymn to the Theotokos, that has some very concerning language. This particular one is called the Great Canon to the Theotokos. So
Okay.
those are both read during the liturgy. Both the language in both of them are problematic. Now, the reason I bring it up, because you're talking about like salvific issues, the reason I say saved despite their tradition, despite their theology, is because this could very easily lead somebody into idolatry, right? Somebody might not know any better, and
Yeah.
they're, oh, well, they're singing in Greek. I can't really understand them. And then they attend the church. Maybe they don't know the ins and outs or whatever the case may be. But let's say somebody's serious about their theology and they pick up on this and then they begin to think of Mary as their salvation in the proper sense. There's a real danger for people to take that at face value and then, interpret that as, okay, well, Mary is my savior, and then that I would say would be very dangerous for your soul.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's one of the most concerning things too. The way that Mary is highly venerated within Roman Catholicism. But now, again, up until now, I didn't know that the Eastern Orthodox that they had some pretty concerning language. And I kind of figured that they probably had some stuff in there, if I really went digging and I did my research, because the claim was always from the Orthodox was that the Roman Catholics take Mary way too far. Their veneration of Mary is like way beyond what the Orthodox Church would do. But just by you bringing that book out, it shows that it's probably about the same. Probably have about the same level of concern, concerning the Orthodox and the Roman Catholic Church.
Yeah, there's definitely some concerning language used in the liturgy for the Eastern Orthodox. I would say the issue with the Roman Catholics is really just their view about her as mediatrix, which
Yeah.
she's the person from whom she goes around and she applies the grace to the Christians, right? She's the mediatrix of grace, right? Not just like in terms of intercession. So
Yeah.
there's that. And their Mariology is a little jacked up as far as the Immaculate Conception goes. That's not found in church history, the Immaculate Conception. You can find people saying Mary was sinless maybe around 400 AD or so. From the Syrian was I believe one of the first ones at 397 AD. In his writing, he says something along the lines of her womb, which was the place of birth pangs and curses, was like cleansed. And then afterwards, in one of his hymns to the Theotokos, he says she's spotless. So he does use like the sinless language, but he's not talking about her being, because the Immaculate Conception is Mary's born without original sin, right? That's
Right.
church. That's not what Ephraim's saying. He's saying that no, the Holy Spirit cleansed, Christ's presence cleansed Mary's womb, right? You can't cleanse a non-existent womb. Or her own conception, that statement wouldn't make any sense. He's talking about pre-purification, which I don't really hold to either, but it's completely ahistorical to hold to the Immaculate Conception.
Yeah.
If you look at Augustine's writing, which they cite all the time on this issue, his statement is something along the lines of Christ's divine presence repelled the natural corruption. What is he referring to? He's referring to Mary's original sin, her earthly corruption. Christ's presence repelled that. It was so divine. Not that she was cleansed of original sin before. But you know, you see this kind of, and I don't want to like use, I don't want to say anything too bad about people, but when you read Catholic Answers articles on this topic, they rely very heavily on a typology that's not present within the early church. It's like two truths. So you take a comparison between two figures and then you impute this kind of third meaning into it. So let me give you an example. I'll give you an example of the principle of the typology, and then I'll tell you the typology.
Okay, go right ahead. Yeah.
So this part's fake, but I'm demonstrating the principle of making up your own typology about this. Okay. So let's say I say Abraham and Moses both had covenants with God, two truths. Okay. And then I attach a lie to that. Therefore, they are one being. Okay, so Abraham and Moses, they both have a relationship with God. They both have a covenant with God. Therefore, they're one being. So now when I go and I check these patristic works, I go check the writings of the church fathers. Look, they are confirming my view that Moses and Abraham are one being. Look, they're comparing them here. They're like,
right.
And Abraham had one covenant. See, they're one being. I just told you the typology is true. So they interpret the earlier patristic works. So the typology that I'm referring to, which is what they actually do, is the New Eve typology.
Oh,
so just as Eve was sinful, Mary is sinless. Okay, so as Eve was sinful, Mary is sinless. Okay, that's the thing. So they say, as Eve was disobedient, Mary was obedient. Therefore, she has no sin. So it's two truths and a lie. Mary wasn't, right? She was obedient to the birth of Christ. So when you read the writings of Justin Martyr, when you read the writings of Irenaeus, when you read these other writings that say these types of things, that say Eve was disobedient and thus death came into the world. I'm talking about Justin Martyr's first apology. I'm paraphrasing.
Right.
Mary was obedient and thus gave birth to the Lord, which, defeated death. Okay. She's sinless. Look, they just compared the two. But it doesn't actually say that. They're using this fake typology that they've invented much later to reinterpret it. But people get confused by that, and people fall victim to, that's the most quoted Catholic Answers article that I come across is the New Eve typology, because there's no other early text that says anything along those lines until you get to Ephraim in 397.
Yeah, and that's what I've noticed too, especially when I've come across the Catholic Answers website. To where I'll see where they'll cite something, or they'll cite like an early church father, and I got quite a bit of sources here, on my Logos, thanks to Catholic Answers, because like they'll cite a source, and then I'll go and I'll pull it up, and then I'll read the source, and I'm like, I don't think that's what the early church fathers, I don't think that was their conclusion. Like, this was something, the way that the Roman Catholics see it nowadays, it seems like that is something totally different from what I see in the original writings from the early church fathers. You know?
I think the Immaculate Conception and the Assumption of Mary, those are the two most indefensible doctrines, or dogmas rather, because they're mandatory within the Roman Catholic Church. Those are the two that are the most indefensible. The ones that are more defensible, Mary is the Theotokos. That's just flat out true. Jesus is God. Mary is Jesus' mother. Therefore, that's an appropriate term to use.
Right.
You can't divide or make some kind of like schizophrenic division in Christ's natures. It doesn't make any sense. It's not like he's got like qualities, just battling within himself. That's not how it works.
Correct.
But the other one that would be more easily defendable would be the perpetual virginity. There are some early church debates. The reason why it's defendable is because tradition. This is not within the scriptures.
Correct.
Joseph is, according to tradition, was very old when he married Mary, and likely was married prior. So the brothers of Christ in scripture are likely from Joseph's first marriage. That's the view of Epiphanius. Jerome makes another distinction, and he says something like, no, actually the word brothers of Christ means, and they're debating amongst themselves, means cousins, right? It's like they're, no, those are cousins, which is just
I've had that conversation.
That makes no sense. The Epiphanian view makes more sense. But then there's a third view that they're actually the blood brothers of Jesus. The problem with this is argued by Helviticus, who is an Arian. So, are you going to trust the words of a bitter Arian after the Council of Nicaea, or are you going to look at the view of Epiphanius, who actually does have patristic support? It makes sense. If Mary was going to get married to Joseph and he's very old, she could have remained a virgin, because we know that he died before Christ's earthly ministry. You don't see him written about during Christ's earthly ministry. He was dead at the time. So he was an older gentleman. So that lends credence to that. I think that's easier to defend, but still take it with a grain of salt because it's tradition. But those two are easier to defend. The two that are ridiculously hard for a Roman Catholic to defend would be the Immaculate Conception and the Assumption of Mary. So that's, it debates press on those 2 points.
Yeah, because even when I've had conversations about the perpetual virginity of Mary, and I do hold to the view that, she was not, perpetual virgin. And even when I looked into like Helvidius, from what and maybe you can kind of point me to some resources on this, but from some of the stuff that I've read about Helvidius was that he wasn't like confirmed to be a full-blown Arian, but he had, ties to like an Arian priest or something like that. And that's why they were, that's why they say that, he was an Arian. But do you have like any other source that I can look at? Because I think that, it's Jerome. It's Jerome who comes against, who wrote against Helvidius, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and I think that from a lot of the research that I did was, based off of, well, what we know about Helvidius is mostly based off of that. And then it's quite interesting too, because I think that, if I'm not mistaken, I think that Jerome, or was it, I think it was Jerome or Epiphanius, who believed that Joseph was a perpetual virgin as well. And I was just like, wow, that's not really something that you that you hear argued quite often. Yeah.
I don't think that's Epiphanius's view. Was that the sons of the brothers of Jesus were from Joseph's first marriage. So I don't think he would think that Joseph was a perpetual virgin.
I'm trying to see if it was either him or Jerome. I may have to try to pull that up. But one of them believed that Joseph was like a perpetual virgin as well.
I think regardless, if you hold to either view, if you hold to you hold to the view that those were either way. I mean, let's just walk through it logically, right? Because ultimately, it doesn't matter. The point of my the point of my channel is for people to borrow my arguments. They don't have to agree with my every position.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just going to say, like, logically, let's say Joseph is an old man, right?
Mm-hmm.
If he's an old man and he dies before Christ's earthly ministry, is it logical to think that maybe they didn't consummate the marriage if she was young and he was an older man? I mean, I think that could be the case, because back then, I mean, they don't have the kind of medical care that we have for,
right.
I don't want to be crass, but
yeah.
For an older gentleman, those things aren't logistical.
Exactly.
So I think it is possible that if that was the case, that she was a perpetual virgin, because she didn't marry after him. So if she married him, old man, then that view has plausibility, which is why I say I would recommend against taking that approach in debates with Roman Catholics. The easier hanging fruit is Immaculate Conception and the Assumption of Mary, because they don't have
it's the stuff that follows that, that view that she's a perpetual virgin. So it's like she's a perpetual virgin, therefore she was sinless, therefore she was bodily assumed into heaven.
Right. The reason I bring it up is because we have to be smart about the issues that we're engaging on, because if they're plausible, like they could be possible, but yet we hold a position on it. Let's say it's plausible, but I don't think she actually was a perpetual virgin. It's probably smarter to debate on the other topics that are more wrong than on the ones that, could have happened kind of deal. So that's my advice for anybody engaging in these debates.
Yeah, it's definitely you know, and I said this one time before during the live stream. I'm like, man, you know, that the perpetual virginity of Mary is one that that's a debate that can go either way, you know, because I got quotes from early church fathers and they bring up some really good points, and I'm like, oh man, like this is you know, these are some pretty good arguments, you know, concerning the perpetual virginity of Mary. But you know, just like you say, you know, that could be something that could be heavily debated. But then at the same time, you know, the things that follow, the other Marian dogmas that precede that, are the ones that are either that are, you know, more uh harder to defend from the Roman Catholic and Orthodox side. So now, do you believe that we have that we can ask the saints for intercession or ask Mary for intercession?
So that's a good question. There is some patristic witness to it around the 4th century. Some you might be able to cite something shorter than that, earlier than that. But I think the issue that I really come across is this: it's more of a biblical basis. When you see the example of somebody doing that within the scriptures, right? And I'm talking about within the 66 books, not apocrypha. The early church said that you can't use those for matters of faith, right? So I'm not going to pull from the apocrypha to
Mm-hmm.
make doctrine. But according to the scriptures, when you talk about like intercession or petitioning the dead, well, we have a clear example of somebody who did that. That was Saul, and he petitioned the dead. He invoked a necromancer to bring the guy up. He's asking him questions, and then he
Mm-hmm.
says, "Talking to me, you should talk to God." And then you have later in Kings, and it says basically God killed him for inquiring of the dead and not of me. So if God killed him for doing that, I don't necessarily think that we should do that. Now, to be
Right.
completely honest and fair to their position, to the people who would advocate for the intercession of the saints do pray for us in heaven. We see this in Revelation, okay? And the saints aren't necessarily dead spiritually, they're dead bodily. They're alive in Christ, right? They're in heaven, okay? So if you were to say, that's typically the argument that they'll throw back. They'll say God is the God of the living, not the dead. And the prayers of the righteous are powerful and effective. It's James, book of James. So therefore, we should petition the dead to pray, or the saints to pray for us because they're alive in heaven. So I would say they're not dead. They don't fall under that Old Testament condemnation.
Right.
Well, about dead bodily, the guy that Saul sought out wasn't, dead spiritually either. He was alive, but God still killed him for asking him and not himself. So I don't necessarily think that is uh, that is something that we should be practicing. I
Right.
do kind of get the argument that the Roman Catholics will make about it. Okay, they'll say like, okay, well, they're alive, they're not dead. The saints pray for us in heaven, so there's that one little gap that we have to bridge. Now we just ask them to pray for us. It's just like if I were to ask you, Alton, to pray for me, right? You're interceding, okay? That's intercession. So there's no difference.
Yeah.
Then that's what they
Right.
say. But in
Yeah.
practice, then you get prayers like, Saint Anthony, find my car keys. That's not intercession. You
Right.
get prayers like this to Mary that call her the salvation of the Christian race. That's not intercession. That's bordering on idolatry. I mean,
Yeah.
I would say if that's really what's in your head and you think she is the salvation of the Christian race, that probably is idolatry. Now, I don't want to judge the individual souls of people, but I think it's very dangerous. And I do think it does lead to honoring them above honoring God, particularly if you take that view to its logical conclusion. This guy, this saint, is better at this one thing than me. So my own prayers aren't good enough. I'm going to pray to that guy
Mm.
because his prayers are more powerful rather than going directly to God. Well, then you've basically just made the saint an idol. If I go to
Right.
God, it's over. I got to go to this guy, right? So I think there is a tendency. Now, I'm not saying every Roman Catholic does that in their head,
Yeah.
but definitely it leads to that, I would say, tendency mentally for people when they're encouraged to go pray to particular saint over God. Now, I'm not saying that's the official teaching. I'm not saying, that is necessarily like dogmatic or whatever. I want to be very clear to their position, but it definitely does lead to that kind of mental state.
Yeah, because I think that even Epiphanius, I think he kind of alluded to cautioning people to watch the way that they worship or how they venerate the saints and stuff who've passed on. And I think that you even have the Council of Heria, which was supposedly the seventh ecumenical council. It was deemed the seventh ecumenical council, but there is some issues where people said that not too many bishops or patriarchs showed up to that one. Any recognized bishops or patriarchs showed up to that one, but and I read it here in my live stream where they kind of parroted the same concerns, the same ideology. That you could end up slipping into idolatry if you are taking a lot of these prayers to like or intercessions and stuff to like the dead saints and stuff like that. Like you can end up slipping into some form of idolatry. So
Yeah,
cautioning people not to do that. Yeah.
council is Nicaea too. So I mean, just make sure that we're right about that. But as far as the prayers to the saints, you do have early attestation that from Ambrose that makes it pretty clear that he thinks that you should pray to them because their prayers are powerful and effective. But you do have other writings that would counter that, and it's kind of a debate in the church, especially early on. So there's not really one big consensus on it, but you can find early citations in favor of it. But the Seventh Ecumenical Council is Nicaea too. So just want
Yeah, because even in the Council of Heria, it considers itself the seventh ecumenical council, but it was disqualified, I think, due to the lack of bishops that actually attended. So, and then I kind of went into that as well because with the Second Council of Nicaea, it seems like that it was more politically driven. So I'm just like, I kind of got my, I kind of got my opinions about that as well. With Empress Irene and all of that stuff. But,
yeah, I think it's interesting. You can't have I don't support women's ordination. I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that you can't ordain women. You can't have women bishops. They can't speak in church in the Eastern Orthodox Church. Yet you accept Nicaea II, which is a council presided over by a woman, right? So, that's the old. I mean, they were literally writing appeals. They're appealing to the Empress in several of the writings. Read the minutes of Nicaea II. Most of it is appeals to the Empress. So they can't be priests. They can't be bishops. They can't make decisions in the church. They can't even talk in church. But you're going to allow a woman to preside over and convene your ecumenical council. I think is kind of interesting.
Yeah. I wonder, do you got time for maybe a couple of more questions? I don't want to keep you too long. We've already done an hour and a half. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. Let me see if I can scroll up. I think somebody asked a couple earlier. Yeah. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were saying something. Let me see if I can. Oh, okay. So here was one that was posted earlier from Adam. He says, ask him to add, question to ask him, to add in the Jesuits, the Jesuits and Catholicism. I don't think I understand that one. Maybe Adam, if you're still here, you go ahead and repost that. And this is from Josh C. He says, okay, so Greek Orthodox is part of the Eastern Orthodox churches. What about Russian Oriental and the true Orthodox? Are they still separate?
Sure. Yes. So all of those churches are still separate, but there's a difference in the communion between the Moscow Patriarchate, so Russian Orthodox, right? Moscow Patriarchate would include Rokor. They are not in formal communion with the Ecumenical Patriarchate. So the Patriarchate of Constantinople, which is where you'll have the Greek Orthodox Church, several other groups. So they're not in what's called administrative communion. But the laymen meaning like anybody that attends those churches, they could still go get communion at any one of those churches. So it's an interesting, different situation that actually happened very recently over the war in Ukraine. So the Moscow Patriarchate ended administrative. They might use a different term for it, but I believe it is administrative communion between the two groups. So the Ecumenical Patriarchate, the Moscow Patriarchate are not in communion with each other, but the laymen can still go to each other's churches, no big deal. Oriental Orthodox, that's different though. They're probably one of the earliest schisms. They broke off over a controversy over the natures of Christ. So they're a little different. They have Christological issues. So like the Coptic Orthodox, not in communion with the Eastern Orthodox Church, things like that. So yeah, those are all different. So Ecumenical Patriarchate, which is who I was reading from, Archbishop Elpidophoros, the Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew, those guys are not in communion with the Moscow Patriarchate, who is led by Kirill in Russia.
Oh, okay. And then we have this question from Mr. Called Unto Holiness. He says, what is the difference between Hindu idolatry and Catholic idolatry?
Sure. I mean, idolatry is idolatry, right? But I think we overuse the term, specifically in debates. Like you might privately hold the opinion that somebody bowing before a statue is idolatry. I mean, but you're going to have a hard time defending that in debates when they were bowing before the ark, and that has images of cherubim in it, right? Which you could consider a statue. They'll use that as defense. They'll use the embroidery and the curtains, the artwork on the ark itself as defense, catacomb artwork as a defense. I'm not an iconoclast, so I wouldn't consider bowing before maybe a piece of art to be idolatry proper, right? But I think the real distinction between the two is one is the worship of pagan gods. Another one, they would at least make a difference between veneration and worship. So I think if we're going to engage in debates on these topics, I'm not saying I agree with their position, but we need to be very clear on exactly what it is we're talking about, because I think the issue that we get in with Protestant apologetics is we make these big sweeping generalizations, and then when we're forced to back up our claim, it goes against some of the things that we see in Scripture, right? It's like, oh, well, you can't bow before a painting. Well, what about the people who bowed before King David, right? Is that idolatry? Are they making David their idol? You have to be able to articulate all of those things. Now, you could say that maybe in that person's heart, that those practices could lead to idolatry, because really that's what it is. It's the disposition of their heart. If they're saying, okay, I'm worshiping this thing as if it's my God, like the golden calf, then that would be idolatry. Maybe these practices can lead to idolatry. Maybe some individuals truly do think that the Theotokos is divine or give her divine attributes. That would be considered idolatry. But according to the actual practice of the Roman Catholic Church, they do make a distinction. You have to be able to articulate it. Not saying that I agree with them, but if you're going to hold to the position that icon veneration and things like that is actually idolatry, you're going to have to be able to back that up in a debate. I would not take that tactic because of the examples of the Ark and with David and things like that. You have to get deep into the weeds and say something qualified like, it can lead to idolatry if the person in their heart takes that, okay, well, Mary is divine, so I'm going to, that's really what it is.
All right, I'm going to take two more questions, and then we could go ahead and wrap this up. First question, what are the RC, Roman Catholic, and Eastern Orthodox views of justification?
Sure. So the Roman Catholic Church is kind of interesting. So their views on justification is, both of them are going to be way different than maybe like a once saved, always saved evangelical, right? Both of them are going to be way different than that. The Roman Catholics actually agree to an extent with the Lutherans on justification. They signed a document called the JDDJ, which is the Joint Declaration something. I forget what the acronym is. But it basically says that they agree with the Lutheran definition of sola fide, so justification by faith alone. So, in practice or in theory, they agree with the Lutherans. So, Roman Catholics and Lutherans don't really have too many differences on justification. Eastern Orthodox is different. They'll flat out say it's faith and works. They'll say it's. They'll flat out say it. It's like there's no distinction. Roman Catholics make the distinction. They say it's faith working through love, right? Which is vague. But the Eastern Orthodox don't have any qualms about saying, no, it's faith plus works. So I guess that would be the biggest difference.
Okay. Because I think that, well, I guess you could probably read that in the Canon 9 of the Council of Trent. But the way that they word it, it almost seems like that it's faith that works as well. But, just like you said, when you read Canon 9 and in the Council of Trent, they can twist it and say that it is, faith working through love. So yeah,
speaking out of both ends of your mouth. So you have these in sola fide, right? So you hold the justification by faith alone, you're going to hell. And then, now very recently, actually we agree with the Lutherans, so
right.
it's a tightrope that they walk.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up with this last question. Brother Slim says, if the veil was split and we have direct access through Christ, then how is intercessory? Intercession. I guess he meant intercession. Yeah, intercession of the saints not consider a lack of faith.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess that's subjective. You know what I mean? If I was going to say that somebody doing something is like a lack of faith, I mean, I think we can go directly to, I know we can go directly to Jesus. I don't see the need to invoke a saint. It's not like if you're going to hold to the point that they try to make, at least in pop apologetics, it's just like praying to a friend or asking a friend to pray to you, for you. Like, I don't know, I'm going to ask Bob, pray for my knee. I hurt my knee. Right. Okay. That's intercession. But like St. Anthony, find my car keys because he's got bonus points to finding lost stuff somehow doesn't make any sense when you're just arguing that that's intercession. I would say that's not intercession. I'm saying that's you're praying for them to do things for you. That borders on, I would say that actually does border on idolatry because you are inquiring and asking them to specifically to do things for you.
Gotcha.
Now, I would make the distinction there. Now, some people do it like ignorantly. Like, I don't think that praying to the saints is something that is like, that's an automatic like disqualifier. Like you're not a Christian anymore. You're going to hell. So don't think that, because there are individuals that, I don't know, you see in like a movie, they go to like their dead father's grave and they're like, Dad, I know you can hear me. Like, I like, oh, that guy's going to hell now, like,
right.
I don't necessarily think that's the case. Or, I would even say the majority of Roman Catholics, the way that they would view it, they're just mistaken. I pray that God has mercy on them. I just think that the practice can lead to idolatry because it really is a disposition of the heart and how that individual, if you elevate them over God.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of where my position is too, and that's why I try to have as many conversations with Roman Catholics and Orthodox, as well. Instead of just lumping them all into one box, because and like I tell people, I'm always fair. Just like we got some people that could take the faith and go far left with it, with Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholicism. We got we got a lot of Protestants, and I've addressed them as well, who've taken the same faith and or the same faith that I hold to and go far left with it as well. So but yeah, just like you say, I think that it is an issue of the heart, and I think that that's why these conversations are important, and this is why I think that your channel is important too, because you dispel a lot of myths and you bring out a lot of great information to say that, hey, no, this is what the actual position is, this is what the church father and this is what the councils literally say. This is from their own mouths. So before we can start getting anything twisted about what we've heard or what we may have been taught to believe, it's like, let's just go back to the source and let's read that and see exactly what was said and how they came to those conclusions. So
yeah, absolutely. I'll say this because I know you want to wrap up soon. But the reason that it's so important to address what they actually believe is because if you're not doing that, you're just punching against a pillow. It's going to just move with every punch. You need to get to the epistemic basis. So you need to get what they're actually bound to. If you can get bound to, then you got some flesh. Then you have a plan of attack. Then you can actually address some of these things without the conversation just being circular. It's like, no, actually, you are bound to this because of this.
Exactly.
But make sure you understand the distinctions, because what some people will do, especially when they're new to this, is they'll grab, I don't know, some random council and then go address a Roman Catholic and pull some canon that they know they no longer hold to, when they actually distinction between the canons. Eastern Orthodox is a little different. I would recommend read the rudder, right? For the Russian Orthodox, read the Nomo canon. Those are the canon law books for those traditions. So the rudder, the Nomo canon, read what it says about the canons of the ecumenical councils. Then they have nowhere to run. They can't say, oh, we could just reject them, you know. So I think that's a good method of you know, kind of pressing them a little more on what they believe going forward.
Exactly, man. I appreciate it. Listen, where can people find you?
Sure. So on YouTube, I'm Cleave to Antiquity, the name right here.
All right.
X, also Cleave to Antiquity, so you can find me there. Those are my only two social media accounts. But hey, keep me in prayer, because I've got some big appearances coming up. I just recorded with Redeem Zoomer today, but I'm going to be going to California to shoot a show with Ruslan soon, so that'll be interesting.
Oh, okay, man, that's great, man. You see, listen, I told y'all I'm prophesying again. All right, I'm prophesying. He's going to soon surpass me. I'm only at, you know, I'm kissing 15,000 subs. He's going to have that by the end of the year, no doubt, no doubt. By the time he goes on Redeem Zoomer and Ruslan, he'll be up to 20K. Probably 50K by the end of the year. So, you know, but listen, y'all. Yes, sir. Yeah. And listen, you know, add Brother Ben to your prayers. Because like I tell you guys all the time, you know, people think that turning the camera on and having these kind of conversations, that it's easy. It's not, you know. I mean, when these cameras go off, we still got to raise our families. We still have to let our light shine for Christ through our actions every day. You know, when we go to work, when we're just ordering food, you know, sitting in a restaurant. And, you know, and with this, sometimes you get a lot of scrutiny. A lot of people, they're going to leave nasty comments and, you know, on your videos. They'll send you nasty comments, nasty emails. You know, I get them periodically. And sometimes, you know, it can be a little disheartening, but, you know, but yeah, let's continue to pray for Brother Ben and a lot of the opportunities, the great opportunities that he has coming up. And then we got my brother, his humble servant. He's also non-denominational as well. So, you know, shout out to him. You know,
great. Yeah, God willing, it'll be good. The channel will continue to grow. Yeah. I think with the negative comments, though, I don't really take any of them to heart. It's just that's free engagement.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, listen, thank you, Brother Ben, for showing up. And listen, I think I have his channel tagged in the description of this video, so you guys can just go ahead and click on that, and that'll take you right to his channel. And go and subscribe. I'm telling you, he has some really great content. Really great content. You're missing out. You know, whether you're Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Protestant, I implore you guys to go check it out. Well, listen, Brother Ben, thank you for showing up and taking time to come and bless the channel. And listen, man, you know, hopefully we'll see you next time, because I know that you're a pretty busy guy. You got some stuff going on. And I think that's about it. I think that's about it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right.
Bless you.
All right. All right. Well, listen, guys. Thank y'all for showing up, you know. Thank you guys for always showing up, supporting the channel. Even when there's, you know, a little bit of people showing up, even when there's a lot of people showing up, you guys are here. You guys are here. Listen, so I'm gonna read the last read the last results of this poll that I have live only on YouTube, where I'm asking the question, how should we view Catholics and Orthodox? So far, 26% of you all say they are brothers or sisters in the faith. 44% of you all say that they need the true gospel. 19% of you all say it depends on who you talk to. And 11% of you all say, I'm just here for the conversation. Well, listen, y'all already know what to do as we get ready to get up out of here. Y'all hit that like button, notifications bell, subscribe, all of that good jazz. You know, especially if you are a new subscriber, hit that notification bell so whenever I get ready to go live, you guys will be here. All right. And you guys continue to keep the conversation going in the comments section, you know, on this video. You know, let me know what you guys think about, you know, Brother Ben from Cleave to Antiquity and this whole interview that we did. I think it was a pretty great interview. I learned quite a bit. Got some new sources. Gonna be putting some more slides together. All right. Put some more slides together. All right, but listen, man, with that, let me get ready to set this up real quick. All right, so listen, y'all enjoy the rest of y'all night. And I will see you guys next time, Lord willing. Peace.